tonight, our member Amber, who works in cybersecurity, will go through some information and steps that we as activists can take to stay safe while using technology. Amber, go ahead.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. Like she said, my name's Amber, and I am a person who works on things on the internet. No, I work in cloud, and so what I do is I secure systems to protect client data. That's what I do most days, and I also make sure that people don't go where they're not supposed to go in our network. But I always told people security isn't something that you've got to limit to just like the professional world. For the most part, I think a lot of it comes down to what you do at your own home. And so I want to take some time tonight to just have a very quick talk about some basic security things you can do to protect yourself, the organizations you're a part of, like this one, and to make sure that you feel safe with your own personal data in general. So, without further ado, give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen. So, the title of this little presentation is Security, Privacy, and in parentheses, anonymity for all. Always, but especially now. And I say always, but especially now, because these are things you should be doing all of the time. I will say up front, you may see up at the top there that I've got a few other tabs open. The jigsaw phishing quiz is something that we'll do together as a group. So please feel free to shout out some answers when we get to that point. And Tiffany, if you'll just keep up with like a few questions for me, if anything, if I'm not looking at the chat, if I miss anything, I'll be happy to come back to it. But yeah, without further ado, let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda. So I didn't go too strict on this. I wanted to open up the floor for you all to have questions and maybe bring up things that you're thinking about with regards to security and privacy and anonymity. But there are some things that I think are important. Those common myths that come up when we're talking about security are always fun. So we'll talk about those things that we hear that aren't necessarily true, and there are some things that are true, so we'll get into that. And then we'll talk about why prioritizing security and privacy are so important versus anonymity. You see, I left that off here because those two things matter more for most people. And we'll talk about location data. Everyone worries about where they are on the map and how law enforcement can use that. So we'll talk about how you can protect your data in that regard and keep that info out of the hands of people you don't want to have it. And then from phishing to no click, we're gonna do the little quiz that I mentioned, and look at some phishing attempts, some vishing attempts, some smishing attempts. I'm sure you've never heard those other two terms. You've probably heard of phishing, but they're all the same basically. People using messages that either look really, really dumb or really, really, really good to try to get you to either give them information or to download things that you don't want on your PC or Mac or whatever the case may be, whatever device you're using. You don't want that stuff on there. And then finally, just as a reminder, let's keep it simple. Again, I don't believe in overcomplicating any of this stuff because when you make security scary, people don't want to do it. It's just that simple. Um, and then we'll just summarize and go through a Q&A. And if you have any questions, you can ask, okay? All right. So first things first, myths about security. These are some of my favorites. These are ones that I hear all the time. I don't have anything to hide. They don't care what I do. I'm probably already on a watch list, which is interesting, right? And then I don't know enough about this stuff. So just, right off the bat, you have nothing to hide is an interesting idea to say the least. You have a lot to hide. You have your banking information, right? A lot of us use our phones to kind of keep track of our bill payments. We uh, do all sorts of credit card and digital financial transactions on our devices. So if you just look at that, that's a big deal. But there's so much other information about you that is helpful to not only bad guys or what I like to call threat actors, but it's also helpful to law enforcement. It would be helpful to someone who may have just a malicious intent towards you. And so you do want to protect your data. And in regards to activism, the more engaged you are with any social movement work, the more your data can be used to map networks of activists. So if you are working with one organization, there's a pretty good chance you're working with some other ones. You do want to protect the people who are affiliated with those groups, and you want to make sure their information isn't being stolen either. And you can be a doorway to other people's info. Just FYI. And then next, they don't care what I do. While data collection is widespread, it's everywhere. You've already given away a lot of your information just because you wanted to use your phone. But don't worry, you can significantly reduce your digital footprint and protect future activities. When I say activities, I do mean like organized protests and things of that nature. You can protect that information from getting out to the public when it's not supposed to be out there. Um, and then I'm probably already on a watch list. Again, I said this is an interesting one that I've heard before. Um, so there are lots of different kinds of lists out there. Don't worry about this so much, especially if you're just using your right to protest, especially if you're out, advocating for people and talking about protecting people's rights. You're within your rights as a citizen to do that. I'm not an attorney. I always like to say that. But if you're out talking about ICE raids and trying to make sure that people know their rights, you're not breaking the law. That's already been debunked. So keep that in mind. But while it may be true that you could be on a watch list, you have the right to keep your political life separate from your personal one. We have a right to protect our own interests there. We need to keep our right to associate and express ourselves whole. That's important while other rights are under attack: women's rights, immigrant rights, the rights of minorities across the country. While all those rights are being targeted, your right to your personal life is also very important to keep in mind. And in this political climate, we face multiple threats to our privacy, and that's one of the more important things for us to think about: the level of importance we are placing on our own personal privacy. And then, yeah, I don't know enough about this stuff. Well, you probably do know more than you think. You don't have to be a professional working in infosec or be a black hat hacker to do the things that we're going to discuss today. We're going to be discussing some of the simplest ways for you to protect yourself. I also want to stress something that we all need to remember, and this is important. In the words of, I believe it was Tim Snyder that said this: please continue to disobey in advance. Disobey in advance. So, the things that you want to be involved in, don't let fears about cybersecurity or your phone spying on you, things like that I've seen online a lot, don't let those things keep you from being active and doing what you want to do to protect others and yourself. Um, now, let's see. Are there any things that you guys have heard about or that you have seen that point to these myths? Does anyone want to share some stuff in the chat? I'm going to see if I can look at the chat just to get my eyes on it. But yeah, just share it in the chat. I do see a hand up. Is that Mona?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, come
So,
on, share that.
so my question I've been hearing, things I've been hearing about lately, is about international travel and your
Mhm.
phones, and that they are now possibly checking phones. And I guess my major concern is, what do I do about my phones when I go across the border to another country?
That's a great question, Mona, and thank you for bringing that up. So there are definitely things that you want to do. I tell people the first thing you want to do is just turn off that fingerprint and face ID. So in my field of work, we always think about it like if the cops came in and asked us to hand them over something that may be incriminating an organization that we're working with outside of our company, right? We aren't going to just hand that over. And you, as a individual citizen, you shouldn't do that either. Law enforcement, from my understanding, they can compel you to use your biometrics or the Face ID fingerprint scanner, but they can't force you to type in a code to your phone. Um, you can just say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I don't want to do that. And speech regarding, something that is being asked for by a law enforcement officer without a warrant, that's something that you're protected from. But if they held the phone up to your face and they unlocked it, at that point, and they do have other devices and things that they can use to access your data, but remember to turn those features off when you're traveling. Another thing I like to tell people is that if you can, just get a cheap phone or one of your old phones and use that while you're traveling. That way, any communications that you don't want to be exposed aren't, because everything is on another device. So that takes the headache out of trying to remember what you can and can't worry about while you are, of course, out of the country. Um,
To follow up with that, I actually heard that they legally have the right to confiscate your phone, but how do you shut off the thing about your phone, your face? I don't even know how to do that. How do you get that off of the way you go into your phone?
Well, that would be something that you would do in settings. It depends on your device. I'm gonna try to get something together. I'm gonna give you guys an activist checklist at the end of this, by the way, so you will have something you can go back to document wise to refer back to. But that's a great question. We may be able to grab like a little blurb about two different kinds of devices, maybe Android and iPhone, for example, so that you can see those steps. But I always tell people search online for those steps. More than likely, someone's already got that out there. Just search, if you got Face ID turned on, how do I turn off Face ID? That's a good place to start. I see another hand, Justin, and then I'll move on after this. Go ahead.
Hi, hi Amber. I
Mhm.
just wanted to clarify what your question was. You said, like, where have you seen people saying things like this?
Yeah, what have you seen? Where have you seen it?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I've seen people say like I'm probably already on a watch list in
Mhm.
virtually every meeting that I've been in. And also like my personal feeling has been that in order to like the amount of work that it would take to actually secure most of our communication and activities would be like really great. Like it'd be a ton of work and maybe not worth it because they have so many backdoors into like every single digital device. So to me, the feeling has been that I might end up putting a lot of work into trying to be secure, and it could be like an illusion of security. And so at some point, I'm trying to prioritize like what is the actual threat that I'm trying to protect myself from? Like, what are my specific goals with security, and therefore which actions would be the best ones for me to take?
I like the way you're thinking, Justin, because not everything is necessary for everyone. I'm going to talk about, like encrypted communications using things like Signal, not the way Pete Hegseth used it, the way it's supposed to be used. Don't do what he did. That was really, really, really dumb. And don't join chats that you probably aren't supposed to be in unless you are a journalist and exposing people. If you want to protect other people's privacy. But usually, you want to be able to communicate with people more securely than SMS, which is the standard text messaging option. that you're going to, usually have just on your device right off the bat. And so what you want to be using is a secure messenger like messaging app like Signal. You can also use it for phone calls. So those types of things you can do, especially if you're talking with people who are organizing with you, just so that you're protecting their communications. Is encrypted end to end. So both ways that communication is not interceptable. And encryption does give you some semblance of security when it comes to your communications. As of now, Signal does not have, as far as everyone, in the security community is aware, there are no back doors into Signal. What happened with Pete Hegseth is someone got invited into the chat that wasn't supposed to be there. So, but we will definitely get into that. So I'm gonna move on here to the next thing. And I always say, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, security and privacy are more important. I'm going to show you a very short clip from this video. If you do want to see this video, I've put the info in the bottom right, or sorry, bottom left corner. Privacy Guides is a channel on YouTube. Watch it if you want to learn more about this stuff. But I'm going to show you the differences between security, privacy, and anonymity. So give me 1 second. We'll hit play here. Hopefully you can hear it. I just realized, can you guys hear this?
No, you have to stop
Share
sharing your screen, and then when you
yeah.
share it, there's an option to share sound.
Yep, I just realized I did not do that. Bear with me just a second, because I was like, I don't think you guys can hear this. All right, let's see. Share sound. Okay. So there we go. All right. So again,
Yes. Actually, it's really quiet.
really low. I wonder why. It's not letting me adjust the audio. Let's see. Audio settings. Share screen. Huh. Okay. We'll try that again. If it doesn't work, I'll put this in the chat. It's not a big deal to watch it. It's just, and I've got some talking points. I can talk through this versus watching it. But they do a really good job with this video.
No, so quiet.
Still quiet. I wonder why. That's a thing to figure out for another day. But essentially, what they talk about in this video, and I will be sure to put this in the chat for you as well, is they basically walk through why you essentially want to make sure you know the differences between these three subjects. So to me, privacy and security are most important because privacy is basically dependent upon a need to know basis, right? So if, for example, we were talking about your medical records, you don't want me to have access to your medical records. If that information is not publicly shared, you want that info to be private. So that's an easy way to think about it. And this is where encryption comes into play for our communications. If you are communicating with people and you're sharing information, or you're sounding off about something that's frustrating with this current administration, maybe you don't want that information to be out on the web. You want to make sure it's only going one way to the person that's supposed to see it, and their comms are coming back to you directly. And so this is where, like I said, encryption comes into play. It protects or masks information when it's in transit across the web. Apps like Signal are designed for that, and they only allow intended recipients to view the information on the other end. So if someone were to intercept something encrypted, for example, what they would see would not be what the other person who was supposed to get the message would see. It would be all jumbled up and scrambled. And it's very difficult to just take encrypted data and view it. There are a lot of steps in there, and 9 times out of 10, you won't get the information as it was supposed to be viewed. So it's really helpful to know that you can use other options for communication. And like I said, Signal is by far, in my opinion, the best option out there. You've also got WhatsApp and some others, but definitely keep in mind that you can use these apps for talking and texting. And then security. So when I think about security, I think about it as do you trust the information, right? Is what you are looking at what you're supposed to be seeing. When we're talking about secure data, we're talking about information that's trustworthy. And we're also talking about ensuring that the information you're accessing is being accessed by you and not some other person. So security is something that comes into play when you're talking about banking or entering your medical apps if you have any on your device. I like to mention that this is where people are typically missing out on very easy ways to keep themselves safe. So when you're setting up your apps, for example, most of the time you set up a password, right? For a lot of things. When you enter your email information and you're typing in your password, that is security at level 1. We'll call it level 1 security. The next step up from that is to use things like two-factor authentication. That's where you get the little text message or you get an email with a code that you type in to get past that stop gap or that stopping point. And then, of course, you've got other options such as passkeys, which are becoming more popular. You may notice that now when you are entering an app, it'll ask if you want to use Face ID, right? Instead of having to type the password in. There are threat actors out there that can log your key inputs. And so passkeys help to prevent that sort of thing. You're not going to really see a lot of people having to deal with keyloggers, by the way. Another thing I want to mention is that is not something that happens all the time, but passkeys help you to keep from using the same passwords over and over, and they are going to ensure that the data that you are accessing is what it is supposed to be and that you are the right person to have access to that. And I will say this with security, you can go too far. This has happened to me before. I recently experienced like the downside of too much security on my personal device. I was using the delay feature, and if you're on your iPhone and you're wondering what is she talking about, there's now an option to delay major changes on your device. Basically, we'll summarize it that way. And so if I were to, for example, want to install a new app that needed VPN access on my device, I would have to basically send that request by hitting, yes or whatever. And then my phone would immediately go into a delay. So I would have an hour before that change could actually be made. I did that and I needed to access something for work. And for an hour, I was locked out of what I was trying to do. So that's where you want to make sure you aren't overdoing it. And that goes back to, I believe, what someone else mentioned about, like, what do I need to focus on? What do I need to prioritize? It goes into you making decisions about your security and the level of security you need based on how much things could really impact your life or prevent you from doing what you would need to do on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, anonymity. I always tell people I'm gonna hold your hand while I say this. Don't get angry. But you are never truly anonymous online. You know, the best threat actors out there all around the world end up in prison. Okay. So I always like to say anonymity is one of those things that you really don't have to focus very much on. So think about that before you put your black hoodie on to fight for justice, like Mr. Robot or something. Like you really want to keep in mind that even if you're using Tor, I don't care what VPN you're using. I don't care if you're hopping from server to server and you've got private DNS and all this other stuff set up. There's always a way to track things back to people. So that's why I don't like to put anonymity up there with security and privacy, right? I do encourage you to make yourself less of a target. That's what's most important. And I encourage everyone to use VPNs and browsers other than like Google to diminish that digital footprint because basically, you know, your online security or your online activity is really detailed. It will tell you more about yourself than any FBI profiler or any psychologist ever could. Okay. You know, if you are someone who frequents, for example, watching the news online and you're always looking at MSNBC, I can guess that you lean left, right? And from there, I can extrapolate out and figure out more and more about you based on the other sites that you're visiting. Are you, you know, visiting the ASPCA? You keep reading these articles about animal rights. So I think that you're probably someone who either is an activist in that space or you care a lot about animal rights. Name 1,000 different things that you do online every day. Those things are used to profile you. And so we want to reduce that footprint so that you're not as easily identifiable. That's the goal. Not so much to just make you disappear online, but we will talk a little bit more about some other things that you can do to try to reduce how visible you are. I'm going to talk about those suggested texting and calling apps a little bit more, VPNs, browsers, password managers, things that you can do for GPS that'll help, and some other ways that you can maybe protect like email communications, that sort of thing. All right, so Signal. I've got the info for Signal up on the screen for you. And again, I like to mention it because it works. And I saw someone mention Pete Hegseth in the chat when I said that earlier. You are not going to end up in that situation. You will not be being reported on by some journalist from the Atlantic. 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to invite people to your chat that you don't know. But usernames are really one of the biggest things I love about Signal, right? You don't have to give someone your phone number when you're using Signal, because that is a very, very sensitive thing. I don't like all of the spam calls I used to get. Luckily, I've been able to mitigate some of that. But like the amount of just annoying things that happen on our phones every day that keep us from doing the things we really need to do. Some of that comes down to just that information being leaked by someone else's, experience with a breach of their security. So I like that Signal gives you the opportunity to hide and use what we would call a pseudonym, or a fake name that is associated with you but is not technically you. So that's kind of cool. It gives you that feeling of pseudonymity, not anonymity. And of course, I personally am very fortunate to work for an organization that's adamant about advocacy. They encourage us to speak up at my job, and they don't think it's okay to tell people not to talk about their concerns and their worries. But everyone's not lucky enough to have that experience. A lot of the people we're going to work with in advocacy or in activism are going to be people who have 9 to 5s, and they need to make sure They are not dealing with someone being able to just knock them off course professionally. And I can respect that. And I think a lot of us can. We want to take care of our friends and family. And prosecution of your rights doesn't just happen on the courtroom level or on that side of things. It happens at our workplaces, our religious organizations. It happens in our homes. So protecting those you care about is just as important. We want everyone to participate and be able to scream into the void whenever they want to, right? So if you've got a friend that goes back and forth with you about how terrible this administration is, and they work at a very conservative law firm, for example, they shouldn't have to worry that your text messages being leaked could lead back to them. Not to say that that would happen, but that's just an example of something that could happen. And I have, put those instructions for Signal, the baseline instructions for how you could actually download the Signal app and get it set up on your phone. Another thing that I love to mention that I have down in red underneath those instructions, or the little outline for Signal, is that now on your devices you can lock individual apps. Do that. If there are apps that you are particularly concerned about, especially your communications, the instructions are on the screen for both Android and iPhone. Go ahead and enable hiding the apps in the app switcher and turning on a screen lock so that you don't end up in a situation where when you accidentally tap your text app or whatever the case may be, it's just opening up to your last conversation with your one best friend about the other best friend not inviting you to their birthday party. I don't know. That's just what I think about as a day-to-day thing that could happen. But no, seriously, you can use screen lock as another layer of protection. If someone were to get into your phone, well, now they've got to get past that screen lock as well. So just FYI, in case you forget that Face ID and that fingerprint scanner, and you need a second layer of protection while you're traveling. All right. I do have some hands raised. I saw Kendra. I'll go ahead and ask you to come off mute, Kendra. I know your question probably came earlier, but I'm trying to answer as I go. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I have an iPhone 16 Pro with voiceover on it since I'm blind, so I can't read the screen with my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But I have Face ID, which I don't like, turned off. But I still have several apps that I can't seem to turn off Face ID for that still make me use it. So how do I turn it off when I have had it turned off already? How do I cover those apps where it keeps popping up on? Or is it even possible to do that? Like, because it feels like to me there might be some impossibilities there, but I want to understand what the deal is with that.
Okay. That's a good question. Are we talking about like your banking app, for example, or are we talking just like your photos?
Yeah, or even like some of my TV apps and stuff like that.
Oh,
It just it pops up and I'm like, I want my passcode or my password, not my Face ID, before getting to my passcode. So how do I kill that part of the security wall?
So yeah, so that's going to be in your settings under privacy, and you should be able to disable screen lock. That is where you can actually like see each of the individual apps when you go into the settings and go to your privacy controls under each individual app. You should be able to go in and turn off that feature.
Okay.
And so I would say that's probably your problem there. They did turn some stuff on the later versions of iOS that some people loved and others didn't. So I hear you.
Yeah, because I have the later versions of iOS and
Mhm.
in some of the settings, like they turn it off for all apps, and then it lists like 4 or 5 apps where it's off,
Mhm.
Yet some of those apps even still show the Face ID. So I don't get why it's not even why I'm where to even go. Is privacy and security like the only place you can do that if it keeps persisting, or is it just impossible at that point?
Yeah, you should be able to turn it off in settings. If you can't, I would recommend taking your phone into, if you have, your cell phone carrier, take it into a store or go to an Apple store, specifically since you have an iPhone, and chat with them about that. Since I can't see
Okay.
your phone, I can't tell you specifically, but I will tell you you should be able to, theoretically, based on how that feature works, turn that off for those individual apps.
Okay, yeah, because I don't have a local Apple store here in
Oh, I
Salem.
hear you. Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
so I
And
can't
then of
do that.
course,
Go
go,
go
yeah,
into an
Google
Apple
those
store.
steps. Type, if you go to Google, search specifically for what you're looking for, and some,
Yeah,
either AI will
I
create
did that.
one. Okay.
Yeah, I did that and still got nowhere.
Ah, I wish I could help you more. But yeah, try settings and privacy. Keep going under those individual apps and see if you can figure it out under the individual apps themselves.
Okay,
Justin, thank you.
thank you.
Yep.
Hi, yeah. So I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, like what are the risks of security that we should be addressing so I know which actions seem the most worthwhile. Because like in life, the security stuff is like invisible, right? Like if I'm being profiled or something, which we all are, because people in the chat are talking about the Palantir
Hmm.
deal and how like they're collecting like all of our government data into one gigantic database, and they're going to do probably lots of nefarious stuff with that, and there's really nothing I can do
No.
to take that out of their hands. And so to me, that sort of feels like the bigger risk. And I wonder if there is much value to them in like reading my private text, which I know that they can. And so I'm sort of wondering like which actions seem most worthwhile on the one hand, and then the other is that so as far as organizations like such as Solidarity Warriors or lots of other groups I'm joining recently, almost everyone is using things like Discord and Slack, which are insecure.
Hmm.
And I'm just wondering about that, I
So
suppose.
yeah, so that's a good question. And I think I understand it. The way I'm understanding it, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is you're wondering when communications need to be secure. Let's say, for
Yeah.
example, Justin, let's say you get really involved in a group, right? And you start planning protests, right? You're planning you're getting the permits, you're talking to different groups about specific details, and some of that information needs to remain quiet until you all are ready to announce. That's a time where you do want secure communications. If we're just in Slack talking about, different news that's already out there, or an event that's already planned is announced, that's on the internet, right? So there are times where security is going to be a priority, and I would say it's more so in the planning stages, or if you're working with people who do not need to have their information, like they don't need anybody to know that they're working on this particular thing. I was actually at an event with someone recently who works for a really conservative company. They don't want anything coming up about employees working to do any sort of protesting or anything of that nature. Those are times where you want secure communications with that person. They should still be able to participate and be active, but they don't need to do it in a public forum. They may not be able to be active in Slack or in Discord. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Just specifically because, as I was saying earlier, my earlier question, like this idea of security, like total security,
Mhm.
feels like it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole of like
Yep.
infinite effort for no return.
Right.
Like having some kind of a container around like what am I actually trying to secure and why would really help me s spend like an appropriate amount of time on this and not freak out
Right.
about it.
Right. And that's why I'm mentioning like where these things actually are useful versus where they aren't. Because like I said, everyone doesn't need to go and grab a VPN. That's a thing, that's a myth. Not everyone needs it, right? If your online communications and activity are not really detailing a lot of like very very private or personal things that you don't that you like, for instance, if you were already searching the internet before and looking at the news, chances are you're probably not going to be doing anything very different than what your previous search history shows. But for example, if you have joined an activist network and you all are working on, let's say you're working on a national protest, then you might want to make sure that your communications are more secure than they were before. There are levels to security that you have to worry about based on your action, and your activity is specific to you. Um, the goal here is just to give you some ideas about tools that'll help, but your security needs are based on how much of a threat uh, law enforcement having access to your communications would be. I don't care what they, I don't care if the government sees that I told my mom good morning, but I would be concerned if I were communicating with a person, again, who could not be publicly associated with an activist group. I would be concerned about them having their information exposed by me or someone else in the group. So it would be best that we moved our communications over to a place where we can be secure from end to end. Does that make sense? Or does that help you to think about where your needs may be?
Yeah, it certainly helps put like a framework around it. I just put the chat, but like knowing how much of a threat it actually is for law enforcement to be like potentially reading my communications is part of the issue, because as Tiffany was saying in the group, like everything we're doing is nonviolent and
Right.
legal and will always be. So it feels hard to know, because I feel like sort of if they start snatching people up for, I mean, they're already going after immigrants and stuff, but so like that's the big risk is, right? It's like they come and they target you individually, but if they target me because I'm just some dude, right, and I'm a citizen, then like surely we're all in a lot of trouble. And so it makes me wonder how much use it is to secure my communication that much, because it seems like we'd have safety in numbers more than we'd have safety in like individual security practices, and that's sort of the main tension that I'm dealing with internally.
And that's
And that's
true.
true.
That is true. You do have safety in numbers. Um, I still tell people the same thing, even when it comes to outside of activism. It's still important for you to think about threat actors, not just law enforcement, right? There are, for example, I hate to use this, but Big Balls came with Elon Musk into the White House. He's a hacker, okay? This is a guy who's been caught in numerous scandals around blackmailing people, trying to force info dumps, that sort of thing. Those types of threat actors are also out there. So it's not just law enforcement. It's good. And I'd also like to mention the FBI last year, right, had already said, you guys need to start using Signal. You need to start thinking about secure end-to-end communications. If the phone companies and the carrier companies are not doing that, you can do that yourself, and you need to do that. That was the FBI. That's not me. So don't overthink it when it comes to these things. Just as you can implement them, try to, but don't focus on it so much that you're like going down a rabbit hole. It's more of like, oh, my friends and I are going to start doing some activist work together. Let's use Signal. Simple, right? Instead of, well, who might want to come at? Don't think about that, because you'll end up in a very very dark place, my friend. Just stay out of that rabbit hole, okay? But I hope that helps. And speaking of
Thank you.
other, yeah, of course. Speaking of other ways that you can try to be a little bit more secure, VPN is always on the list. Here are 3 tiers for you to consider. From free to fees, these do tend to work. I do like that Proton, for example, gives you one free device. So if you're primarily using your phone, there you go. I just saved you whatever the cost of Proton for a year would be. So you can start to use this. And with VPN, there are different levels based on your needs. But basically what VPN does is it just encrypts internet traffic. So it just protects your personal location information. It means your internet service provider can't see what sites you were visiting, and they are only seeing that you're connected to a VPN. Websites you visit will see the VPN's location and IP address instead of yours. So Google can't send you those personalized ads we all love so much so often. So that's another huge plus for your security, because I still feel like outside of just worrying about threat actors, these internet entities have a lot of visibility on you. Like they can see a lot of things about you. Again, that bothers me. As someone who works in security, it makes me sick when I see an ad related to something I was talking to someone on the phone about. I don't like that. So the more that you can reduce your digital footprint and your digital profile, the better. And you're also taking some of your power back in that, because that's a little form of activism as well. Since we're all talking about oligarchs and whatnot, tech companies definitely have been, at the top of the list for those. So taking back a little power there is important. And these services can be even more private if you purchase gift cards to use them, so they don't have your credit card information or your Bitcoin wallet info, depending on how you're paying for it. IVPN and Movad, which are the second and third options here, are both able to use gift card purchase options. And I'll have a link to something explaining how you can use that if you want. But I do like the idea of no payment info saved with Movad. And I also like that it's prepaid. You pay for what you need. You want it for a year? Great, pay for it for a year. You want it for 6 days? I think the least they'll let you do is a week, but you get the point. You could just pay $6 a day, and or excuse me, $6 per month, and you'll have the service for as long as you need it. And so it's really nice that you aren't bound by a contract with them. And then of course IVPN is really, really good. It's the best because you get so many other services. But again, you might not need this. You may just want to watch Netflix in another country. Again, you should have the power to do that for what Netflix costs. So Proton, IVPN, Movad, these are great for you outside of just activist work. But as an activist, when you're thinking about how you can secure your communications even more, this will be a great way to do that. I also like to mention that VPNs don't work well with every website, right? So if you are not if you're not using your VPN all the time, you may not notice this, but if you use your VPN and you're trying to log into your bank, for example, they may stop you because some sites don't work well with VPN. So just keep that in mind as you're looking into potentially using this to protect your identity online. All right. And privacy-focused browsers. This is, again, talking about just protecting your online footprint, like your fingerprint to your digital life is in what you search. And so the less info about you out there, the better. Privacy in browsers is not something you get a lot of, especially with Chrome. A lot of us use Google Chrome, but I'm sure you've heard of Firefox. You may not have heard of Brave or DuckDuckGo. Brave is interesting because they are associated with a crypto coin. So if you're not really into, working with anything to do with that, and I know a lot of people don't really love crypto, you may want to avoid them, but they are really, it works really good. They have a very intuitive model. DuckDuckGo is fun, but it's not as accurate sometimes, so you'll have to use it for a while But Firefox is definitely the most recognizable of the three. I always recommend researching the best option for you. But the thing I love about browsers is that, again, that's taking some of your power back and removing the controls of the algorithms that may steer you away from information that you're looking for as an activist. You want to be able to see what you want to see. And I like to think about it like I'm taking a pullback from Google when I use a privacy focused browser. Um, last, what was it, 2 years ago, Google made $237 billion in ad revenue. That's like 75 to 78% of their revenue was off of you using their browser. And because they are, steering our, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, steering the way that you search and what you find online, it's, in my opinion, very important as an activist to not be shielded from information that I need in order to do what I want to do for my community and for the people I care about. So thinking about it that way, it's a little different. You're getting to protest the power that the world's largest company has in Alphabet, and you're also getting to control your search history and your search results a little bit more. Mary, I think I see a hand up there.
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
So I put in 2 questions already, and Tiffany answered one.
Mm-hmm.
Passwords in my notes on my phone. There's so many stupid passwords we need, and easy access. So she answered the question, get a password manager app.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like?
You set me up. You did. My next slide, Mary.
Okay.
Shout out to you. You did that. That's perfect because we're just gonna go right into password managers next. But yeah, go
Okay.
ahead with your question and we'll get to that.
Well, there was one more. The first one was, where or how is the best way to learn how to implement the suggestions you're making? And there's a lot on here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, like, going over the notes, I can go play around with it. And is that the best way? Or is there some, like, in the communities we live in, are there organizations who are set up to, hey, come on down and we'll show you how to make your life secure and safe from the authorities who want to, control everybody?
That's a
Yeah.
good question. To answer the first part, where can you go for these resources? I'm gonna give you guys a link to the activist checklist. If Tiffany hasn't already put it in there,
Yeah.
we will get that out to you. I like the activist checklist. It's really comprehensive. So, like for instance, you were asking about the password manager. Well, they've got a section dedicated to user password managing and strong passwords. Those are two different things under the same header. And I'm actually going to go ahead and go to my next slide. But you do have the ability to use all the steps, and they even provide you with additional links. So if you want to dig into these subject matters a lot more, I'm going very high level on this. But if you want more info, the activist checklist is great, and there are other resources there as well that will be good for you if you are interested in just protecting yourself a little bit more. Password managers are good though, and I personally really recommend using them, Mary. Like you said, we've got too many things to keep up with, and so I've picked out 2 here that I think are really good. Bitwarden is free 99. We like free, and I do try to make these things as accessible as possible because that's another lift when you're talking about financial obligations with these things. But the reason we want to use a good password manager is because I would assume that most of you are really nice people. If I had more time on this call, I would attempt to do something called social engineering. I'd start asking you questions. You would probably answer them because you're nice folks. I'd ask you about your dog. I'd ask you what your, star sign is, things like that that would help me figure out maybe when your birthday is. And you don't have to say anything in the chat, but I'm sure a lot of us have either done it ourselves or we know people who have used very personal information, right, for passwords. Don't do that. The great thing about a password manager is it'll generate those passwords, and it's tough to come up with like a random sequence of numbers, letters, and characters with any accuracy and remembering what they were. That's what password managers are for. They take the weight off of your shoulders. You do have to have a master password, like a master key, to get in your vault. But once you've got your vault open, you can save notes in a lot of these apps. You'll be able to save pictures in them. So things that you want to keep private and secure, there you go. And again, as an activist, your passwords are important. They are part of your, the fingerprinting we've been talking about. And so you don't want anyone to have access to those things that you're trying to keep out of the hands of threat actors. And then, folks who are trying to steal your data, just get into your bank account. They are going to be trying to get to your passwords. Most of the time, that's the case. More so than law enforcement. I worry about that. So I would definitely say, my immediate homework for you is while you're listening to this, if you don't have a password manager, get one, okay? Start using it. Take a day or a weekend or something and just start filtering through the accounts that you have and update your passwords. Make sure that you're using strong passwords, 10 or more characters. I really recommend 20 characters, and that's a lot. So use the password managers to do that, and you don't have to come up with any of it, and it'll save everything for you. And again, I did have another suggestion here, 1Password, which is actually the best option in my opinion. You'll see if you go to their website that they are highly rated for a reason, but they do cost a little bit, $2.99 a month for your family. And they also track data leaks. So if your passwords were ever exposed, they'll let you know, and they'll prompt you to go ahead and change them automatically. LastPass gets an honorable mention, but some people hate LastPass because they've had some security issues in the past. But I do like it for simplicity purposes. And if you're not really, really worried, I still say LastPass is a decent option for a lot of people. Okay. Mary, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Nice. All right. Sally, I'm sorry. I thought I saw someone else. I'm sorry if I missed someone. Sally?
Okay, hi. Yeah, I have a question. One of the reasons that I'm really I've kind of ignored Password Manager is I'm a senior citizen, so it's like all about estate planning and all that kind of stuff. My brother's going to be my take over the trustee and all that kind of thing. And he said, be sure and have a list somewhere of all your passwords for me in case you die or have a stroke. And so how does that work with a password manager?
Actually, Sally, that is a great question, and I love that you asked it. I appreciate you for sharing that. Password managers are great for estate planning because if you give your family member that information, that master password, they can, you can work with your family to make sure you got all of the important details that you need saved in that space versus in a note on your phone or written down somewhere. And so as long as someone has access to your LastPass account or your Bitwarden account, they'll be able to get in there and see all of those details. You could also take photos if you had like digital files you wanted to save. You could, scan documents and have them saved in that one space. So I do like thinking about these security these secure managing apps as just more than just like passwords. They do a lot. So yeah, for the purposes of like saving your bank account information, right? That's a great place to store that. And as long as someone had access to that master key or that master password, they would be able to get in, grab all of that information without having to search all over the place for it, getting in safes and all of that, can be complicated, especially when you lose a family member. So that really helps to simplify stuff. I used to be a banker, so that's where my head goes for estate planning purposes. It's also a good spot for that too.
Okay, so
Your question.
basically what I hear is that I only have to worry about saving one password instead of 400.
So you'll still
No,
have
I mean for my brother.
yes, exactly. There you go.
Okay.
You got it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Sally, I appreciate that question. I don't know. I like talking to people about estate stuff. It's been a while, but yeah, great question. And that's still a security thing. Again, guys, like security is more than whatever they showed you on TV or like whatever, when you see the people with all the black screens. My screen doesn't look like that most days, just FYI. Most people's don't. But the little stuff you see on TV, that's not really what security is about. It's about a lot more. So I love that you guys are expanding out from just like the very narrow definition of security. Beth, I'll try to answer your question.
Okay. Yeah, so I just was wondering, so if I use Brave and I have the Proton VPN,
You're even
okay.
more secure. Yeah, you're
Okay.
extra secure because you've
Okay.
got a browser that isn't keeping track of all that ad data that they use to get you to buy a vacuum cleaner. And then you're also not sharing your site searches with your internet service provider. So Cox or whoever isn't looking at that stuff.
Okay. What about my email address? Like, cause I have, Proton email address too, and it says I can use, whatever the facade name, the fake name, but I don't know how to do it.
So the thing is, if you create a Proton email, the only person who could receive a Proton email and it be encrypted end to end is someone who also has Proton email. So keep that in mind. It does work. It'll encrypt from your end, but like if you send it to me and I was using Yahoo or something, it wouldn't be encrypted on my end. So Proton email is really cool. Like if you're in an organization, that might be an all-encompassing solution for you, right? You've got your VPN, you've got your email, and the entire organization is using Proton. So everything's secured under that umbrella. For you, if you're sending an email, Beth, you just have to make sure the other person is using the same thing. But Proton email is really good, though.
So if I'm sending emails to the news stations for press releases for the rallies, are they not seeing what I'm sending them then?
Yeah, they can see it. It's just so basically encryption works like a briefcase. I'm gonna put something in the briefcase and then I'm gonna pass it to someone else and they're gonna walk it over to the other person or to you. I hand the briefcase to the person that's gonna hand the briefcase to you. Well, the encryption is that person between the two of us with the briefcase. The other person on the other side has a key or they have the code to their briefcase. They open it up, they can see everything. But the person, that was between the two of us, that's the encryption. Now, if both people don't have the encrypted email, right, that doesn't mean that the other person can't see it. It's just that the secure part of that, the part where just they can see it, isn't there for them. But from you to them, your end is encrypted. So on your end, Nobody could go in and, you know, do anything nefarious. Should,
Okay.
you know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was a good analogy, but yeah. Yeah.
It was hard to follow at first, but I got it.
It takes a, yeah, I always have to think on my feet with those. So I'm getting better, but thank you for that question.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. So location, guys. We're about done here. But I do want to mention this. This is the answer. There's really nothing for me to add to this. This slide kind of explains exactly what you need to be thinking about. Apps that need your location while in use, your Maps app, right? Ride sharing apps. You know, Lyft can't find you if they don't know where you are. So, of course, they need your location. Apps that don't need it all the time, food delivery apps, you know, once you've sent that order off, they have what they need. You can turn it off if you want. But apps that definitely don't need your permission to see your location. Photo apps. Please, for the love of God, turn your location off in your photo apps, especially if you're an activist. Let's say you want to take pictures at the, you know, at the event, and you know you want to share them online. 9 times out of 10, it'll be easy to locate you by the background. And now there's plenty of tools out there that can do that. But I'd still say don't make life easy for people who are trying to get into your business. Photos have metadata in them that tell, you know, things like your location, time, date. That information is in the photo. It's actually in the picture. So that's one of the big things. Games don't need your location unless, you know, maybe you're playing in a specific scenario where they would, but most of the time they don't. But they will ask because they sell that data, and that's how a lot of companies make money. So just keep in mind, that's another thing that you want to be, you know, aware of, because this information can be subpoenaed by law enforcement, and it can also be purchased online for free. Sometimes for free, not all the time, but there are situations. If you Google yourself right now, you probably have a bigger footprint online than you would like to. And I'm going to send you some info about how you can reduce that too. But the information that's out there, a lot of it came from apps that you didn't, or maybe you filled something out one time and that company sold you know, your info to a data broker. Now it's online. So don't make that easier. Turn your location services off where you can. You can do temporary allows for certain apps. You can turn your location services off completely for others. So just keep that in mind as well. And bonus tip, this is about the removal of that information that's already out there. Delete Me, Optory. These are companies that have a reputation of helping you to delete your history online, or to delete things like your old addresses, your date of birth, phone numbers, things of that nature that are already out there. If you've ever done a background check for a job, those companies love to sell your data. So just keep that in mind. And you can clean that up again. And then finally, I'm done here. Aside from showing you guys this phishing quiz really quick, and I'm gonna go back out of it. But yeah, phishing is very simple. Don't call numbers in emails, text messages, or direct messages. Don't click on links in emails, text messages, or direct messages, and don't respond to people asking for money. Those are the big things. That's what I always tell people to remember. If you remember that, when in doubt, just don't do it. You'll be fine. And why does this matter for protesters? It matters because, you know, again, your information is targeted for a lot of reasons, not just by law enforcement. And so when you are phished, you are basically giving someone a backdoor potentially into a lot of details that you don't want them to have, possibly about you or others. So just keep that in mind. So this is just a a little phishing quiz from Google, actually, and they did a really good job with this. So I'm going to be Bob today. We're going to make up a name and email address. I already did this. These emails don't matter. All right. So this is an email that you've probably seen at some point. I'm going to try to open up the chat here. But if you guys would help me out here looking at this email, hopefully you can see it pretty well. Does this look real to you or no? Just out of curiosity. No? No one knows? Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Depends
See some
on how
yes. I see a
professional
yes. I
Luke
see a
Johnson
no.
is.
Okay. All
It
right.
doesn't tell you what the company is, the department. What is it
Okay.
belong to?
Okay. Those are some good observations. I'm fine with anyone coming up and just, give me an answer. No?
I
All
don't
right.
know who Luke Johnson is.
You don't know who Luke Johnson? Okay. That is a concern. All
And
right.
the fact that there's that long number after Luke Johnson's name.
Okay. It's kind of sketchy. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to tell you. This is from a cybersecurity expert to you. Every time you get an email that looks sketchy, don't click on anything, but do me a favor. I'm going to show you a trick. Hover. Now, you see that's a link, right? You can tell it's a live link because my cursor or my mouse changed. In the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, you can see the actual address. This says http://drive-Google. Kind of sounds right, but --Google?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And someone said, I don't know Luke Johnson. Why is Luke Johnson sending me a department budget? This is my personal email, right? Bob at bob.bobby.com. My personal email is not where I get my business information. And I don't know anybody who's supposed to be sending me a department budget. These are telltale signs that this is a nefarious link. If you hover over a link and you see that in the bottom left-hand corner and it even looks slightly suspicious, don't click on it. But yeah, you guys did good. I think that was good. All right, we're gonna say it was phishing. You were right. We'll keep going, and I'll send the link with this. But it does explain what I just talked about in this little thing here. Here's another one. Well, I'm gonna run through these really quick. Yeah, that's right, Elle. They like to make you feel like something's important, something's dangerous. So yeah, I think I like where you're thinking, where your head's at, Elle. That's right. So Coca-Cola, why would they be sending you a blender or offering you a blender with vegetables? I don't know how and fruits. I don't know how healthy anyone else thinks Coke is, even with it being a Coke Zero. It's still not the best thing you could choose to put in your body. And I've never known Coke to really care about your fruits and vegetables. Have you all seen them be interested in blenders? These are telltale signs. They did a pretty good job, but look at this email address. What is that? What is that? Right? Same thing. This whole thing is a link. This is pretty dangerous because you could click anywhere and even on the Coca-Cola symbol end up where you don't want to be. Again, hovering shows you that address is weird. It's too long. It's not concatenated. Just don't click it. But you want to delete this and send this to your trash. It's not good.
Nothing is free.
That's true. You probably didn't sign up for anything either for them to be sending you this. They did get the name right though. They did that, but the email looks bad. And I'm just gonna click through that really quick. I was gonna try to get to the vision, but I might not make it there. This is a good one. So this is actually PayPal, guys. This part though, this is fake. This is actually PayPal. And this is one of the better scams that we've been seeing recently. They got my email address right because that is my email. And this is not real. So again, trash it. Don't worry about it. You can contact PayPal. They're used to getting those phone calls though. That's phishing. Yeah. But again, why would they be telling you about an invoice that you aren't supposed to be getting? Little stuff like that. I like to just remind people, read before you click on stuff. Drop boxes. This one's kind of tricky, but this one might be real. Yeah. Blender of techniques, love it. Okay. But I was gonna, let me see if I can get through this last couple of ones. Nope, not a phishing email. I'm just trying to click through because I was trying to get the text messages. That's where they are. All right. You're gonna see these two, right? They're talking about a verification code. These are quite common. Did you request anything? If not, it's trash. It's just that simple. I don't even read these, to be honest. No. Yeah. So we'll say phishing because it is. Yep. Fisher used tricky language to create urgency. Two-step verification. Someone used your password. Google.support. That doesn't sound legit. So I'm going to send this out. I'm not going to finish this because I want to give Tiffany time to wrap things up, but I appreciate you all very much. I didn't get a chance to answer Sally's last question. I'm sorry, but thank you. That's an awkward ending to this. But
Thank you so much, Amber. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight. This was super informative. I'm so glad we had you teach us all this cool stuff, Amber.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.